you like a panelist, not like the keynote speaker. So.
That's great.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Van Dusen, Executive Vice President of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Welcome, a hearty welcome to all of you to the Woodrow Wilson Center and to this program on sexual violence and its political and security implications in the Congo, and a special welcome to Madam Ambassador from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Wilson Center is delighted to co-sponsor this event with the International Crisis Group, represented here by Mark Schneider at the end of the panel table, a Senior Vice President of the organization. The Center's Africa program has always worked closely with the International Crisis Group in the field, seeing the International Crisis Group as an unparalleled resource. The Woodrow Wilson Center is the national living memorial honoring President Woodrow Wilson, in providing an essential link between the worlds of ideas and public policy. The center addresses current and future challenges confronting the nation and the world. The center promotes policy-relevant research and dialogue to increase understanding and be instrumental in enhancing the capability and knowledge of leaders, citizens, and institutions worldwide. Created by an act of Congress in 1968, 43 years ago, the Center is a nonpartisan institution supported by both public and private funds. Through close to 800 meetings a year and the presence of over 150 scholars from all over the world during the course of a year, the Center's work and scholarship commemorates the ideals and concerns of President Wilson. The tragedy of the Democratic Republic of Congo in recent years has many historic antecedents. 32 years of Mobutism, 2 brutal wars in the 1990s, and continued armed conflict, all characterized by civilian abuse, victimization, and denial of humanitarian assistance that may have caused as many as 3 million lives, possibly many more. Sexual violence is common, unfortunately, and has been exacerbated by the wars and ongoing military operations of the last 2 decades. One reporter refers to the provinces of North and South Kivu and Equator as ground zero of rape. The American Journal of Public Health cites a statistic that 48 women are raped every hour in the Congo. An Oxfam Harvard Humanitarian Initiative study in 2010 concluded that 40% of the rapes were committed by civilians, perhaps many of them by former soldiers, which is a 17-fold increase in civilian rapes between 2004 and 2008. Those statistics are horrifying, but they show that rape in Congo is obviously more than just a problem of war. It is a problem of a dysfunctional, traumatized, and fractured society. The Woodrow Wilson Center has been involved in these provinces of the Congo since 2006 through its cohesive leadership initiative, seeking to reconcile the legacies of war and depredation wrought on many communities. Through a series of workshops held in several communities and the participation of over 800 individual leaders in them, we have focused on the inclusion of traditional leaders as well as community, ethnic, and government leaders. Dr. Mukwege and Undersecretary Otero will join Mark Schneider in leading a discussion on the Congo this afternoon. Dr. Mukwege is the director of the Panzi Hospital in Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu. Dr. Mukwege can help us understand more fully what lies behind the horror of rape in eastern Congo and explore with us how and what can be done. He spoke previously at the Woodrow Wilson Center in August 2008, 3 years ago. We welcome you back to the center. Yes. Undersecretary Maria Otero, welcome to the Woodrow Wilson Center. Born in La Paz, Bolivia, Maria Otero has had a distinguished career and served as president and CEO of Axion, a pioneer leader in economic development working in 25 countries. She is now entering her 24th month as Undersecretary of State for Democracy and Global Affairs. It is my pleasure to turn over the podium to Steve McDonald, Consulting Director of the Woodrow Wilson Center's Africa Program and the Program on Leadership and Building State Capacity. Steve has brought enormous leadership to the Wilson Center. We deeply appreciate his many contributions. He will moderate the session this afternoon. I know we will have a productive meeting. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much, Mike. We appreciate your support, and we'll keep working on those pronunciations. Let me offer you my welcome, too, on behalf of the Woodrow Wilson Center again, and on behalf of the Africa Program and the Project on Leadership and Building State Capacity. The proceedings, I'm not going to say any more about the issue before us because we have a panel of experts here that are going to give us more information than we can probably digest today. We want to leave them all the time. I won't reintroduce them either. We're going to be speaking in the following order: Dr. Mukwege first, and then Undersecretary Otero, and then Mark Schneider. All have been deeply involved in these issues and in the region for many, many years, as has the Woodrow Wilson Center, and we're just very, very happy and proud to be able to present this to you. Each will give remarks for about 12 or 15 minutes. And then we'll open the discussion to the floor for questions and answers and further exchange. So again, welcome very much. Let me also join Mike Van Dusen in welcoming Ambassador Matifu again for her presence here. We really appreciate your support and all the work you do on behalf of Congo and the people of Africa. Thank you very much. Dr. Mukwege. That's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, pardon me, Dr. Mukwege. An administrative note, and it's my fault for forgetting. Dr. Mukwege is going to speak in French. So for those of you who need translation, you have your headsets. Please put it on channel 1 and be sure it faces the podium here so you can be heard.
Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles, Messieurs, c'est un grand honneur pour nous d'être avec vous cet après-midi pour parler de ces problèmes cruciaux qui endeuillent l'Est de la République démocratique du Congo pour plus de 10 ans maintenant. En fait, le viol, pendant très très longtemps, en période de conflit, avait été considéré comme un effet collatéral de la guerre. On pouvait même le considérer comme inévitable lorsque on est dans un conflit armé et que tout conflit devrait se terminer par le viol des femmes. Et si nous reculons un peu dans l'histoire, nous pouvons même nous apercevoir qu'à un certain moment, violer les femmes du camp considéré comme ennemi lorsqu'on a vaincu les camps ennemis, c'était tout à fait normal. Et ici, en fait, c'est comme si les femmes étaient considérées comme un butin de guerre comme tous les autres butins. J'ai eu l'occasion de suivre un film qui s'appelle Résolution, qui avait été tourné par Madame Margot Wallström sur le viol. Et ce qui m'avait frappé dans ce film, c'est que le film montre à quel point le viol a un caractère transnational. On voit très bien que le comportement d'une femme violée en Colombie, en Bosnie, en Sri Lanka, en Allemagne, au Congo, elles ont le même comportement, elles disent presque les mêmes choses. Et dans leur corps, on sent très bien qu'elles transmettent le même message. Mais ce qui m'avait frappé aussi dans ces films, c'est qu'il y a aussi un aspect transgénération. On a fait témoigner une femme qui avait été violée en 1940 pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Et quand j'écoutais son témoignage, je ne voyais pas la différence avec les jeunes qui ont 20 ans, que je soigne au niveau de l'hôpital des Panzi et qui parlent avec la même façon de sentir la chose. Et encore plus fort, c'est qu'une femme, après 60 ans d'avoir été violée, elle a toujours le sentiment qu'on lui a pris quelque chose que les années n'ont pas pu la rendre. Et ça montre très bien à quel point le viol doit attirer notre attention par son caractère de destruction qu'il peut porter au niveau des victimes. Et il y a le fait que lorsque le viol est utilisé, ce n'est pas seulement un désir sexuel, comme on peut le voir par exemple au Congo, c'est avec un objectif d'humilier, c'est un objectif de détruire, et même parfois, dans certaines circonstances, le viol a été utilisé pour faire une épuration ethnique. La destruction des tissus sociaux, on peut très très bien l'observer comment ça marche. Les dernières années, il y a eu beaucoup d'évolutions et nous en sommes très reconnaissants. Il y a eu plusieurs résolutions, plusieurs conventions internationales et qui ont déplacé ces crimes odieux à le mettre au niveau des crimes comme crimes de guerre ou crimes contre l'humanité, régulés spécialement par les statuts de Rome. Et on peut voir par exemple la résolution 1325 qui milite beaucoup plus pour la prévention et la protection des femmes et des petites filles pendant le conflit. Donc, ces considérations ont beaucoup évolué. Avec la résolution, par exemple, 1820, aujourd'hui, on sait très bien qu'on ne devrait même pas avoir des amnisties pour des gens qui commettent de tels crimes. Et normalement, la poursuite devrait être des criminels et ils ne devaient bénéficier absolument d'aucune remise. Alors, quels sont les impacts qu'on peut observer avec le viol lorsqu'il est utilisé comme une arme de guerre? En République démocratique du Congo, depuis 10 ans, cette arme est utilisée non seulement comme une arme, mais il est utilisé comme une stratégie de guerre. Et là, il faut faire très très bien la part des choses. Une arme, on peut ne pas l'utiliser. Mais lorsqu'on choisit une stratégie, c'est que c'est volontairement fait, planifié, et on s'est dit, on va aboutir à quoi? C'est pour cette raison que vous allez voir dans la presse, on a des articles qui nous disent 300 femmes ont été violées dans une soirée, dans un week-end. Il va de soi que vous ne pouvez pas arriver à violer autant de femmes dans un temps si court si ça n'a pas été préparé. Et si vous l'avez préparé, donc vous avez un objectif à atteindre. Lorsque nous analysons ce que nous avons dans nos documentations à l'hôpital, on voit très bien que ces viols sont commis pour entraîner spécialement 4 choses. Un déplacement massif de la population, créer de l'espace. Lorsque les groupes rebelles ont besoin d'avoir de l'espace pour exploiter les minéraux et pour se créer un espace spécifique à eux, ils utilisent cette stratégie pour déplacer la population. Mais aussi, dans ce qu'ils commettent, ils arrivent à réduire la démographie locale. Cette réduction de la démographie locale s'est fait par la contamination des maladies sexuellement transmissibles, ça s'est fait par la transmission du VIH, mais aussi ça s'est fait par la destruction de l'appareil génital de la femme. À côté de ça, il y a tous les phénomènes qui entourent ces viols, qui consistent à des destructions économiques, donc brûler les maisons, brûler les champs, brûler tout ce que peut avoir la population locale. On observe également qu'il y a un aspect de la destruction du tissu social, puisqu'en fait, lorsque le tissu social peut résister, la reconstruction peut se faire. Et ici, souvent, ce sont des viols collectifs, ce sont des viols devant la famille, devant les enfants pour les parents ou les enfants devant leurs parents. Et ça va donner naissance aux enfants qui n'ont pas de filiation. Et vous pouvez imaginer ce que ça crée comme frustration dans la famille lorsqu'on a un enfant qui est l'enfant de l'assassin présumé des membres de la famille et qu'on ne connaît pas les pères, mais qui est là et qu'on doit garder. Donc, c'est toute une stratégie qui permet à ce que, en fait, on affaiblisse la personne qu'on attaque. C'est une stratégie qui permet à ce qu'on arrache à la personne l'essentiel de lui-même. Le mobile est bien sûr politique et économique. Assez rapidement, les auteurs de ces barbaries, ce sont des bandes armées. Et à l'est de la République démocratique du Congo, nous avons des bandes armées ou des rébellions qui viennent du Rwanda, on les appelle des FDLR. Du Burundi, ils s'appellent des FNL. Il y a des LRA qui viennent de l'Ouganda, des INADEF Nalu aussi viennent de l'Ouganda, et ils commettent des viols de ce type pour se faire de l'espace où ils exploitent des minéraux librement. Depuis quelque temps, nous avions constaté également que ces phénomènes s'étendent à l'armée nationale congolaise, qu'on appelle les FARDC, après l'opération de mixage qui a consisté à mettre les groupes armés ensemble, mais aussi au niveau de la police. Pour terminer, pourquoi ça doit persister pendant 10 ans? Et peut-être dans la discussion, on va y revenir. On observe très bien qu'il y a des niveaux différents. Au niveau national, il y a un manque de volonté politique pour faire face à ces phénomènes de destruction massive qui est en train de se passer à l'est de la République démocratique du Congo. Et ceci se caractérise par le fait que le gouvernant, il banalise ou tout simplement, il nie les faits. Et lorsque on banalise ou on nie les faits, on ne peut pas prendre les actions nécessaires. Il y a un problème d'impunité. Dans la négociation de la paix, malheureusement, on a préféré sacrifier la justice sur l'autel de la paix. Et aujourd'hui, en sacrifiant la justice sur cet autel de la paix, on observe qu'on n'a ni paix, ni justice. Et donc, ça n'a rien changé. Enfin, il y a une absence, à mon avis, et là, c'est mon avis, que la façon dont on a mélangé les groupes armés pour constituer une armée, on n'a pas constitué une armée. On a tout simplement pris des anciens bandits, on les a mis ensemble et on leur a demandé de protéger ceux-là qu'hier, ils étaient en train de violer, sans qu'il y ait le moindre vetting, sans qu'il y ait la moindre formation, juste une tenue. Et je pense que la tenue militaire ne suffit pas pour être un bon militaire. Sur le plan régional, on voit très bien le manque de volonté également politique des dirigeants locaux, des dirigeants locaux régionaux qui devraient normalement pouvoir s'engager dans cette question puisque ça représente une insécurité pour toute la région. Aujourd'hui, c'est le Congo qui paye, mais tous ces jeunes qui sont formés à la haine, à la destruction, qui sont dans la région, je crois que les pays régionaux, s'ils pouvaient s'occuper, ça peut diminuer cette violence en cours. Éviter les incursions armées puisqu'il y a beaucoup d'incursions qui se font au niveau du Congo par les pays voisins. Et ça fait une stimulation des résistances internes par les groupes qu'on appelle des maï-maï, mais qui ne sont pas aussi formés et qui vont faire la même chose. J'ai dit au niveau international, ça continue, puisqu'on peut observer très bien que même avec la présence de la MONUSCO pendant plus maintenant de 8 ans, il y a une absence de stratégie qui fait participer la base, qui fait participer les femmes à protéger dans leur protection. Ce qui fait que souvent, la MONUSCO arrive quand les choses sont déjà passées. Et il est très très important qu'il y ait une stratégie participative dans la protection et la prévention de la violence qui est faite aux femmes. Et enfin, il y a beaucoup d'actions qui sont menées en bilatéral avec une absence totale de coordination. Ça fait que l'insécurité persiste puisque les gens ne mettent pas leurs efforts ensemble pour lutter contre ces phénomènes de violence sexuelle. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Dr. Mukwege. Now we will have Undersecretary Otero.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Dealer's choice.
Indeed. I can't see above this thing. First, let me begin by thanking the Wilson Center and International Crisis Group for taking on this really critical and very difficult topic. In fact, just a few days ago, we have learned of another mass rape of 120 women, perhaps more, in the South Kivu area. And that really underlines how disheartening this issue is. And it's a reminder that in spite of the international efforts, in spite of the work that we're doing, there is a long way to go still to be able to address this issue. I want to thank Dr. Mukwege for the work that he is doing. In fact, I want to tell you that when Secretary Clinton traveled to DRC in Congo in 2009, in fact, it was right when I came to the Department of State, she came back and she said that she saw humanity at its worst and humanity at its best. At its worst was the use of rape and sexual terror as a tactic of war. But she said Dr. Mukwege represented humanity at its best. He has given himself to this work and to the work of the Panzi Hospital. He's really doing heroic work every day, helping women with mutilated bodies, helping the survivors be able to recover from such horrible violence. So not only is he saving lives, but he really is an inspiration to all of us, and it's really my honor to be on a panel with him. Let me just say that the sexual violence that we see when it's used as a target of war, it's really a threat to international peace and security. The international community recognized this when the United Nations Security Council resolutions on women, peace, and security were put forth, Resolution 1325, as far back as the year 2000. We heard President Obama say that countries that are more peaceful and prosperous are so when women are accorded their full and equal rights and opportunity. When those rights and opportunities are denied, countries lag behind. We have heard Secretary Clinton say this repeatedly, that when women are oppressed and marginalized, societies are more dangerous, and extremism is more likely to take place. The suffering and the denial of women's rights and the instability that brings about in nations go hand in hand. This is what we are seeing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the visit that the Secretary made in 2009, she highlighted the devastating role that sexual violence has as a strategic weapon in armed conflict, as was heard earlier. We have seen this increased, and we have made an effort to increase our own response to address this issue of sexual violence, not only in the DRC, but also around the world. What I want to do is just give you some idea of some of the things that we are doing at the Department of State and by the U.S. government overall. And let me just briefly say that as Undersecretary for Democracy and Global Affairs, the pieces of the Department of State that come into my responsibility include all the work that's done with refugees, the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, all the work that we do on democracy and human rights, which comes under the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, all the work that we do on trafficking in persons, which is the Office of Trafficking in Persons, and all of the work that we are doing in environment and climate change. So these are the areas that I work in, so you can see that much of the work that we are doing in one way or another involves itself in DRC. In 2009, the Obama administration, the United States introduced to the Security Council Resolution 1888. which created this UN Special Representative to the Secretary General on sexual violence and conflict, and ensured that we would have a team of experts that would be able to be deployed in these conflict situations to address this issue, to help strengthen the governments to move things forward. In addition to that, the Department of State this year issued a comprehensive strategy to address gender-based violence in the DRC. This was really our effort in support of women, peace, and security. And I don't want to discuss it in great detail, but I want to tell you just briefly the 4 major strategies that we are using, or objectives that we're using in this strategy. The first one is to reduce impunity for the perpetrators of gender-based violence. And there are many obstacles to this one. We heard some of the ones earlier, but the question of impunity that can be backed up by the fact that your judicial system is so weak, the fact that witnesses are threatened, the fact that the political will is weak, the fact that you have penal system that doesn't work. When you put all of these obstacles together, moving forward in this area is not easy, because what you need to do is strengthen the justice system, strengthen the capacity of those that are investigating and moving forward trials towards prosecution are fit. You are doing the kinds of things that are really very difficult. So this is the first piece. The second piece, which is the hardest, and we heard that already, and it's the one that we probably should talk about a little bit more here, is increasing prevention and protection against sexual-based violence for the vulnerable populations. And the vulnerable populations, of course, are primarily all of the women that we are talking about. And in this area, it is very difficult to work, because it means raising public awareness. It means working at the community level to start initiatives. It means working with boys and young men to begin to change the thinking and the way in which the work is done. And it means also working with other donors and coordinating the work. Again, one of the other issues that has been difficult to move forward. The third area that we're working in is to improve the capacity of the security sector to address the sexual-based violence. This is the armed forces, and this means, again, improving their own capacity to be able to do this. It means moving them so that they can not only arrest, but investigate, prosecute, and move criminals forward. The degree to which the government can give support to the armed forces so that they are well equipped, they're well trained, they have the tools that they need. All of these are important areas that we need to work on a great deal. And then the fourth area is increasing the access to the quality services that are given for gender-based violence survivors. And here, while the bulk of the work the one is doing is in this area, it is also very difficult to do. You can't get, because the roads are poor, you can't get to the survivors. There's a wide range of services that have to be provided. So these are, I'm trying to give you the overall view of some of the strategy that we've put forth, and then just some of the things that are being done now. The effort is to work across not only the U.S. government agencies, obviously with AID, but also with local NGOs, where most of the resources go through, and with other multilateral organizations. The United States government has provided about $150 million since 2002 to the DRC for gender-based violence programs. At the State Department, where I am, we have probably, and I was looking as I was preparing to speak to you, we have 7 bureaus or offices that are involved in this work, including several that I am responsible for, and additional ones that work, the Regional Office for Africa, our international office that works with the United Nations, and more than any other, our office that works on women's issues, which has been very involved in this. AID has worked a great deal in this area, has many, many programs, and a lot of the work that it's provided has enabled survivors, 100,000 survivors, to be able to get treatment and care, and to be able to have counseling and some family mediation in other areas. We heard a little bit about the displacement of people here. So it's very important to work with the United Nations High Committee on Refugees, the ICRC, the International Red Cross, as well as all the NGOs that are working also with returned refugees, and even with refugee populations that are in camps, because they also are quite susceptible when women go out to gather wood, when they go out to look for water, they become also targets of this violent crime. Part of the effort within the judicial and police sectors that we're trying to move forward is to use some organizations that can help increase just the knowledge base. So we're using the American Bar Association, for example, and a fairly good-sized program to be able to train justice officials, to train the courts, to be able to address the issue of justice for the victims of gender-based violence. The issue of increasing public awareness about this issue and the severity of this crime is another way in which we're working. And then one other piece of the State Department that works, INL, that works with law enforcement, is helping to train border police to recognize and to investigate this issue. Because again, we heard that there are armed forces from Rwanda, from Burundi, from other countries that come in. The UN Africa Command is small, but it's also doing a considerable amount in the gender-based violence area, especially to help the survivors. We see Department of Defense funds going specifically in this area. And what we are asking Defense to do is to build roads, to create greater access, because if you look at the rapes that just happened, they are in villages where you have to walk 3 days in order to be able to get to them, or you have 17, 20 kilometers before you're able to arrive by foot. So being able to increase the infrastructure becomes one way to help this, and then being able to train the military becomes also an important way to do this. MONUSCO, which is clearly working very strongly in this, is one of the pieces of this pie that is important to uplift and commend, because they really are taking their work aggressively. They are the ones, in the case of the South Kivu rapes of just very recently, they're the ones that went in, gathered the information, sent a mission to investigate, and began to get the word out so that we can move forward and really begin to address that situation. But how it is that we can get early warning signs, how it is that we can keep this from happening before, continues to be the hardest issue that we have. So I think it's important to just say that we are very committed to this issue. We're working closely with the government. We're working with the UN, and making an effort to work with the other international and local partners to strengthen the government's capacity to address this, but also to be able to address it ourselves. This is not also an isolated issue in the Congo. It is tied, for example, also to illegal arms sales, to conflict minerals, to all the other topics that are also part of the cycle of impunity that we are seeing that correspond to this crime as well. And then in closing, I would just say that I want to also highlight the work that Ambassador Vivier, who runs our Global Women's Issues Office, has done in this work. She went with the Secretary in 2009, and they visited a number of camps, came back outraged, and then she has gone back this year, again, to continue doing this work and to move it forward. It is interesting, if you look at her blog, that she has seen some progress. She has seen some movement forward in the training in the judicial system and building capacity and moving some things forward. Certainly President Obama and Secretary Clinton know of this issue directly. They are not only committed to it, but they're committed to it because they see that women are very important agents of peace and security. and they are critical to helping us solve the issues and the problems that we are facing. So let me just stop here, and then we will have a chance to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Otero. Mark?
Thank you. And let me just say I want to thank Jane Harmon, Mike Van Dusen, Steve, for co-hosting this event at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars with the International Crisis Group. I also cannot think of a more appropriate and powerful defender of women's rights and empowerment, who you just heard, than Undersecretary of State Maria Otero to speak here today, as really we all honor Dr. Denis Mukwege. It's a rare privilege, and I should just say today is Congolese National Independence Day, that we're here discussing the work of Dr. Mukwege. He's a remarkable individual, and he's the winner of the King Baudouin International Development Prize for 2010-2011. And I think we all should recognize that while we can speak about these issues here, and we do, that it takes a rare courage to speak about them in the DRC. And so I think that we should recognize Dr. Mukwege not only for his willingness over his career to care for the survivors of sexual violence, but for his willingness to condemn publicly the perpetrators of rape and brutality in the Eastern Congo. And I think we should give him a round of applause. Most of you know for the past 15 years, the Crisis Group has been engaged in helping to try and prevent and manage global conflicts. The genocide of Rwanda, in fact, was one of the major factors causing the formation of the group. We work in more than 60 countries on these issues. Louise Arbour, currently our president and former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, was also the former chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and also for the former Yugoslavia. Our board of trustees now includes, in terms of African leaders, Kofi Annan, Benjamin Mkapa, Cheryl Carolus, Mo Ibrahim, Aya Obe, and others. Our program in Africa covers the 4 major areas: Central, Southern, West Africa, and Horn of Africa. And our 2 most recent reports on the Congo last month focused on the electoral dilemma in the Congo, and earlier on the issue of stability in the Kivu. A few days ago, the United Nations Security Council adopted a new mandate for the peacekeeping force known as MONUSCO. And in it, it stated, and I'm quoting, "It was greatly concerned by the humanitarian situation and the persistent high levels of violence and human rights abuses and violations against civilians, condemning in particular the targeted attacks against civilians, widespread sexual and gender-based violence, recruitment and use of children by parties to the conflict." But that was not the first Security Council resolution that was adopted. That was the 7th resolution condemning rape and sexual violence as weapons of terror and war in the Congo. MONUSCO's mandate was extended for another year. It was directed to give priority to protection of civilians. But given past experience, one has to raise questions about its capability to take the steps necessary to help end the situation in which widespread violence against women and girls takes place over and over again by members of every armed group, official and unofficial, from the LRA to the FDLR, from Mai Mai to CNDP, to the Congolese army itself. Maria mentioned 2 weeks ago that we had reports of another, and our numbers were 170 women victims of rape and sexual violence in 3 localities of Fizi territory. Now, this is the same area where a virtually identical event took place some 6 months ago. While the Congolese army was accusing a former Mai Mai militia opposed to the Kabila government as responsible in this case, it was silent as to other Mai Mai groups aligned with the government who also had committed those abuses. And there's suspicion as well about FARDC involvement. FARDC has established a training camp for the integration of these militia groups in Fizi territory. And the fact is that they simply have not had adequate control over the individuals or over the process. There's a fundamental recognition that the current approach, there has to be a fundamental recognition that the current approach to ending sexual and gender-based violence simply is not working in the Eastern Congo. And the underlying causes of that failure have to be addressed right now. First, there's been an almost grotesque incapacity to manage the demobilization and integration of former armed militias into the FARDC. Too many former militia members have not been vetted, too many have not been paid, and too many, and this is critical, have not been held accountable for past crimes against humanity. Another mistake was allowing the militias to operate as an army within an army by not dissolving the militia command structures after integration. The Minister of Defense announced recently that the structure responsible for integration will be dissolved by the end of June. That's unfortunately an admission not of success, but of failure. MINUSCA and the United States should be fully engaged in ensuring that disciplined integration takes place. Security sector reform in the Congo is absolutely critical for coping with the epidemic of rape and sexual violence. Second, the justice system is plagued with corruption and limited resources. It needs to be fundamentally reformed, and an emphasis again placed on holding accountable those responsible for rape and sexual violence. Last December and January in Fizi, there was another instance, as I mentioned, of rape. And there the DRC government responded quickly and tried the perpetrators, and 2 months later sentenced the Congolese Army Lieutenant Colonel, again, someone who had been one of the former militia members, for his role in the mass rapes. 8 other officers and soldiers were also convicted. Monitoring the carrying out of those sentences and investigations into other rapes continues to be essential. Unfortunately, the repetition of violence, and especially sexual violence, underscores the crucial importance of army reform, justice reform, and respect for human rights. Let me just add that it's not enough just to build capacity. You need fundamental, comprehensive justice reform, not bits and pieces of, in a sense, competing programs by different donors. Ultimately, justice reform means an independent judiciary, not one that's compromised by its linkage to the executive branch. And it also means that every donor engaged in this area should be earmarking a substantial portion of its funding to build awareness on this issue, and also to recognize that if there is no response, that funding should be suspended. And in that regard, third, there needs to be an internal review by the United States of its current military support efforts in the DRC. Clear benchmarks need to be put in place and met by the FARDC in halting sexual violence and child soldier recruitment by its own forces if military assistance is to continue. If they do not meet those benchmarks, military assistance should be suspended. And finally, I just want to highlight 2 issues this year that are likely, unfortunately, to increase instability and insecurity, which ultimately means more violence, and disproportionately the victims inevitably will be unprotected women and girls. The first are the presidential and parliamentary elections scheduled for November 28th. These are the country's second general election since the end to the war. Now squeezed by a cramped, highly ambitious, and overly optimistic calendar, opposition parties already are charging unfair tactics. Late formation of the Electoral Commission, challenges to its independence, lack of involvement of civil society, late registration of voters, and still no agreement on how to get a fully transparent and independently verified registration list lead to a concern about electoral fairness and the potential for electoral violence. And the only way out of this catch-22 situation is to both speed up preparations and negotiate a contingency electoral calendar and an agreement on how to manage a very likely unconstitutional period before the new president is sworn in. fundamental to that is an electoral security plan, which still does not exist. And the process for periodic assessment of this process by donors, again, is essential. There needs to be a consensual plan B for what happens if the benchmarks are not met. Consensual in the sense of political parties, opposition, as well as the governments, and consensual in terms of civil society. The European Union has, in fact, taken the right approach by establishing that its electoral support will be given in tranches, and it will determine and assess whether or not progress is being made towards a fair and free election. And if not, then it plans to stop those funds. And I think the United States should do the same. The second factor this year, unfortunately, is the possible implosion of the Kimberley process as it relates to diamonds and the failure to implement proposed controls on conflict minerals. Without going into the details, let's just say that last week, the steps that were taken in the Kimberley process lead us to believe that the internal process is falling apart. And this is at the same time that we're hoping to move from an agreement on conflict diamonds to an agreement on conflict minerals that secures those areas and prevents illegal armed groups from using them to continue to carry out their activities. In that regard, MONUSCO must deploy police and military resources with the highest priority assigned to protect civilians. It's also the time for MONUSCO, along with the United States, the EU, and others, to deploy every political and diplomatic resource available to press the Kabila government and the FARDC to adopt measures to protect civilians and to hold accountable those who engage in rape, sexual violence, and other human rights abuses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we can applaud our panelists. Next time around, we'll applaud ourselves. I guess that's the definition of a friend and the definition of the term "got my back." Thanks very much for mentioning the National Day. My apologies, Ambassador Matufu, for getting that. Congratulations. Okay, the panel has agreed to take questions and try to have a little dialogue with the audience. We want to remind you that we're being webcast live. So when I recognize you to pose a question or a very short comment, please wait for a microphone to arrive and identify yourself and your association so that you can be heard by our webcast audience as well. With that said, let's open it up. There are microphones available. Just raise your hands. Okay, I've got a question right in front here.
Jacques Bahati with the Africa Faith and Justice Network. I want to first thank the panel for a wonderful presentation. My comment is about what the State Department has been doing. I applaud the efforts, but I think that the State Department has ignored some of the instruments to keep some of the victimizers of our mothers and daughters and sisters away. The Obama administration knows well that Section 105 of what was S2125 bill, which was passed into law in 2006, says that any country that is destabilizing the Congo should not receive funding. And we know, and you said that you heard that militaries from across the borders go into Congo. When are you going to get to you heard to we know? We applaud the United States for including the conflict mineral into the Wall Street reform. The Section 1502 of that law has stirred up some discussion on preventing the militias from accessing to funding. But we would like more diplomacy to make sure our neighbors are kept away and that the FDLR are going home instead of remaining into the Congo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll go ahead and do a response on that question because it's so specifically pointed
Sure.
at you, and then we'll go for it.
Yeah, clearly this is very complex, and I think part of what you've laid out is includes some of the issues that we are considering. we are working, and when I said we've heard, is because we heard from the first speaker that there were these armed groups. I think we all know that the armed groups are in there. And we are working with Burundi, we are working with Rwanda to address these issues and to really move in the direction of being able to make sure that these don't become part of what is contributing to the situation in the Congo. There's no question about that. In the conflict minerals part, there's that is a very active piece of the work that we are doing. You know that the Dodd-Frank Act, the OECD guidelines that have moved forward are precisely the ones that are trying to establish the way in which companies should be addressing where their minerals come from to ensure that they are not conflict minerals. And part of the work that we are moving forward, and this does relate to the Kimberley process as well, is really bringing companies from the private sector around the table to move forward towards addressing these issues themselves and towards making sure that the minerals they use are free. That's not easy to do as you go through the supply chain from the time that you take them out of the mine and they go to the smelter, and then they're used either to make a piece for your phone or for the car you drive or for a wide range of other things that they're used for. And this is a very difficult area also because what we don't want to do also is have companies just leave the Congo and not be able to mine there, because then you really do affect the country economically. And so how to be able to address both of these questions, I agree with you. It's a very difficult set of issues, and we are moving to address them.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll take about 3 questions at a time now and address them individually if you want to, or to the whole panel, starting right in the middle here with this young lady.
Hi, I'm going to say seated, if that's okay. My name is Francisca Vigo Walsh. I work with Catholic Relief Services on their SGBV advisor. I have a comment and 2 questions for the Secretary Otero. The first comment being, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate the engagement of the United States government with the Security Council that led to the development or the establishment of Margot Wallström's office. I'd also like to encourage further engagement with that office now, because as we are seeing the plan for the implementation of Resolution 1960, there are serious questions that are being raised now with regards to ethics, confidentiality, all that would impact the lives and the human rights of the survivors in question, and this would clearly have serious implications for the Congo. I was also pleased, and this is my question, I was very pleased to see, I read the strategy, the GBV strategy for the Congo, and particularly with regards to the first objective, which is reducing impunity. I commend the work of organizations like the American Bar Association and others engaging in increasing access to justice, but I believe that there is a limit to what NGOs can do, unfortunately, on the ground, and there needs to be much higher level engagement to tackle issues of political will with regards to ending impunity. So I'd like to know, what is the plan of USAID and the State Department in not making it an NGO-focused only initiative? And that would lead me to my second question to what is the status of a special envoy, please? What is the position of the State Department? I think that there has been a great grassroots campaign in this country, and several international NGOs, including Catholic Relief Services, have written to your offices requesting support for a special envoy that could work on these issues. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, there are 2 questions there, and I will caution people to stay with 1 question in the future, but there were 2, and they were again addressed to the United States government policy. Let's look at them.
I have a feeling they're going to be coming this way.
Don't forget that Dr. Mukwege is here.
Thank you for your observations and for also just the level of involvement in this. It's really very good. Let me clarify that the approach that the U.S. government is taking is not NGO focused alone, absolutely. And I think that's important to realize. Clearly, as one looks at the resources that are made available and looks at some of the initiatives that one can use, especially as they go through AID, clearly one has to look for organizations that are on the ground, both internationally and local ones, to move things forward. And I would add here that if you look at the NGO approach, at the NGO focus, most interestingly, the focus of it is in dealing with survivors. That's where we're doing a great deal of work, and that's where we're being able to work. But as we heard from Dr. Mukwege, the issue related to, why are we arriving there after it's happened? I mean, that's really where the work is needed, and that is what part of our work is in. Increasing the political will within the government and being able to address that issue at the highest levels is something that we are doing on an ongoing basis. There's no question about that. Ambassador Vivier took a congressional delegation as well. And I think it was in April this year, again, to look at this issue and to address it more from a policy perspective and to help provide even more of a push at the highest levels of the government. There's no question that unless we're really able to address that issue and hit impunity at that issue, we will get some results. We know that some of those that have perpetrated this crime are high-level officials that have political coverage. And so clearly, we are very aware of this, and it's very unusual actually to have a Department of State where the Secretary of State is actively involved in these issues, is visiting the refugee camps, is raising this to a different level. And so I think it's very important to very much highlight that issue. You often won't have an Undersecretary of State also as involved as I am in this area. So I think it's important to look at the policy work that's being done with the government.
The special envoy issue that
And the special envoy, I think that's still being under consideration. I don't know that I can give you full update on that. To be honest, I'm not completely up to date on where it is, but we can get back to you on that.
Okay, well, Secretary, I'm not available, I'm sorry. And if you had that in mind. We do have quite an attendance for our event today, including some people in an overflow room. So let me get the pressure off of Secretary Otero a little bit and pose a question to Dr. Mukwege that comes from Stella Safari, who's a student from studying at Dartmouth, but she's from the DRC. And she asks, some reports have indicated an increase in male gender-based violence. What is Ponzi Hospital's perception of this, and what efforts, if any, are being made to address this?
Merci beaucoup. En fait, comme je l'avais dit précédemment, en fait, ces violences sont beaucoup plus axées vers les femmes et les filles. Mais nous avons eu des groupes armés qui ont adressé beaucoup plus leur violence sur les hommes. Peut-être qu'ils avaient l'impression que c'est ça qui marchait beaucoup plus pour traumatiser la communauté. Et ils agissaient beaucoup plus dans le sud de Bukavu. Et là, on a vu spécialement des mutilations qui consistait tout simplement à la section de l'appareil génital des hommes. Et ce que nous faisons habituellement avec ces hommes, c'est leur aider à pouvoir être continents lorsqu'ils ont perdu la continence. Et sur le plan psychologique, je dois dire que ce sont des malades les plus difficiles. Même si l'homme n'a pas été mutilé, mais le fait d'être violé devant ses enfants et son épouse, il développe des troubles psychologiques qui sont plus graves que ce que nous observons chez les femmes. La tendance suicidaire est très très grande pour ces hommes et je pense qu'il est beaucoup vraiment plus difficile, surtout avec le moyen sur le plan psychologique que nous avons, on a très très peu de psychologues, presque pas de thérapeutes. Quand les hommes sont atteints, ils les sont très mal et ça nous pose un gros problème de la prise en charge psychologique et surtout que la prise en charge médicale lorsqu'ils sont mutilés.
Ah, merci bien. Okay, further questions? We'll take, I think, another 3. And remember, a single question at a time. First one here.
Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful panel. I'm Vijaya Thakur. I'm with Resolve Network, and we do microfinance with women who are survivors of sexual violence in Eastern Congo. And we've worked with Pansy, so thank you for your support. We are starting a program for crisis mapping, working with the Ushahidi platform from Kenya, applying that to Eastern Congo. And you talked to Secretary Otero, you talked about the difficulty of arriving late after mass rapes have already happened. Are there efforts from the from State Department that you can speak of which try to target that particular issue of connecting women, getting them out of isolation?
Okay, let's go ahead and take a couple of more questions, if you don't mind, Maria. I saw one at there. I know I'm not taking the hands in order, but I'm trying to. Thank you.
Dr. Mukwege, Peter Orr, Refugees International.
Mhm.
Dr. Mukwege, merci d'être venu et félicitations pour votre prix récemment accordé, mais surtout pour votre travail. Sinon, vous avez fait référence à des actions bilatérales sans effort de coordination. Est-ce une critique de la stratégie globale de lutte contre les violences sexuelles, programme qui existe sous STAREC?
Okay, we'll stop there. Marie, why don't you take the first question on what's the state doing about isolation of women and reintegration?
Yeah, I think this is one area where there's a great deal of frustration because, how do you arrive before, how do you protect and how do you prevent? And so all the things that would occur to you that one can do, I think are being done. And yet this continues in part for things that we can't overcome. Again, if you look at the villages where these rapes happen, for example, Nakiele in Kivu, there's 12,000 people there. It's very difficult to get to. They themselves cannot get to us in order to be able to get the information. And so there are enormous challenges in addition to the training of people or the sort of preventing situations from taking place where women are more and more exposed. We are even looking at using technology as a way to help women be able to protect themselves. We've even been looked at using technology in order to be able to make payments to the soldiers who are not often are paid very late, and this people see as one factor that contributes to the problem. So couldn't we use cell phones to be able to put payments in their banks? I mean, these are some of the efforts to even take technology to this issue to be able to make sure that we are able to address those points that create the vulnerability and move them forward. Any suggestions are welcome because I think we really are trying in many different ways. And I think this takes not only really creativity, but it really does take also the political will to begin to fight, to find, to investigate, to try, and then to prosecute those that are carrying out these crimes. And that in itself would be one important prevention technique. And that requires a great deal of work, including the judicial reform that Mark talked about, which you can't kind of snap your fingers and have it happen.
OK, merci. Maintenant, la question de coordination des aides nationales.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Je pense qu'ici, je vois beaucoup plus la coordination au niveau du réforme du secteur de la sécurité. En fait, lorsque nous voyons ce qui se passe sur le terrain, c'est comme si on privilégie plutôt les coopérations bilatérales où chaque pays qui veut faire quelque chose vient faire ce qu'il veut faire de façon tout à fait isolée, sans que ça puisse entrer dans un programme global, en fait, de créer un système de sécurité. Un système de sécurité, ce n'est pas un bataillon par là, un bataillon à gauche. Je crois qu'il faut d'abord faire un constat. Et comme j'avais dit, le constat qu'on peut observer aujourd'hui, c'est que les gens qu'on a pensé protéger la population dans la stratégie de mixage, on voit que c'est un échec. Ils ne sont pas capables de le faire. Ça, c'est la première étape, je crois, la plus importante, c'est dire, on a essayé de faire quelque chose, mais on arrive à un constat d'échec. Le protecteur est lui-même violeur. Et ça ne peut pas étonner. Ça devrait être plutôt du domaine de l'impossible que un enfant qui a été détruit pendant 10 ans, psychologiquement, qu'on espère que tout simplement lui changeant la tenue, il va devenir normal. Et ça, tous les psychologues vont nous dire que ça ne pourrait pas marcher. Donc il y a un constat. Deuxième étape, je pense, du constat, ça devrait être dire qu'est-ce qu'il faut pour protéger la population civile. Peut-être qu'il faut une armée, absolument. Mais comment constituer cette armée? Moi, je crois qu'aujourd'hui, concevoir une armée, par exemple, dans la situation du Congo, sans pouvoir faire intégrer les femmes avec tout ce qu'elles font comme travail pour faire vivre les communautés, je trouve que ce soit la MONUSCO ou le gouvernement, c'est quelque chose qui va aller vers l'échec. Il faut poser la question à celui que vous voulez protéger, quel est son besoin? Comment lui conçoit la chose? Comment on peut faire la chose ensemble? Et je pense que c'est à partir de ces constats qu'on devrait avoir une coordination pour dire voilà le besoin, quel est l'État qui veut participer, il veut participer avec quoi, nous avons besoin de la liste est faite de ce qu'il faut faire. Mais aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment par tâtonnement. Et notre crainte, nous, sur terrain, c'est qu'à un moment, tout le monde va être fatigué, parce que tout le monde aura mis, et donc il met dans une porte et ça sort dans une autre porte, et puis on dira ce n'est pas possible, alors que c'est la méthode qui a été mauvaise. Et je pense qu'en ce qui concerne aussi la prise en charge des victimes, plus de coordination, plus d'efforts honorés, plus de résultats honorés. Voilà ce que je pense en ce qui concerne cette réforme du secteur de sécurité.
Mark, I think you have a response on this same point.
Just very quickly, that in terms of one of the areas where we know from Fizi territory that produces the kind of ability to go after civilians is the failure of the integration of the armed groups into the FARDC. And so if you have a training camp that's set up by the FARDC in the Fizi territory, one of the things that you would hope is that MONUSCO would be closely monitoring this process, and that wherever you have these kinds of training facilities where major groups, Mai and CNDP, are being integrated into FARDC, that MONUSCO is there and is monitoring the process and is ensuring, as I said before, that those groups, those militia groups, are broken down and not permitted to maintain their internal structure as essentially militia groups within the FARDC.
Okay, thank you. Now, it's a good day when you have an Undersecretary of State ask for suggestions, so you can take that seriously. It's okay. Okay, I see the hand here in the middle first, and then the lady at the back there, and then the lady on the side. Okay, we'll take those three questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dr. George Alula. Dr. Mukwege, félicitations encore pour tes awards. I met with Dr. Mukwege in 2007 here in Washington, D.C. when he came for the first time to speak to the Holocaust Museum. He asked me just one question. He said that the genocide in Congo does not have anybody talking about it politically. So I engaged myself. I come out with a book in which we say the genocide in Congo was economic and it was also ignored. We contribute to the Wall Street bill that President Obama signed in July last year. But we feel like now it's time for action. You asked, Maria Otero, the Secretary of State, just asked for proposition. I already submitted some proposal to the State Department. We're working with some people there, but it's taking too long. we provide you the solution to secure the country. Going with what we're doing now, as Dr. Mukwege is saying, is an insurance for failure. We need a change of leadership in this country. We need 140 billion to rebuild the Congo, just using what George Marshall did for European country reconstruction. It's a very aggressive project and program that will involve the G8 and G20 countries, not only the US. My question is, why can we foresee that the 30,000 people, military, coming back from Afghanistan to be sent for 6 more months in the Eastern Congo to clean up the mess over there, just the French people did with the Artemis project to clean up Ituri when people were cut in pieces. We need just something very strong, more than what is done today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. The next question is right in the middle in the purple sweater, yes. Wait for your microphone, please. Here it comes.
Yes. Hi, this is Jenny from the Enough Project. I want to say thanks to Mark for mentioning the threat of the collapse of the Kimberley process and our new opportunity with a possible certification process for conflict minerals. This question is for Maria Otero. I'm curious what the U.S. government is doing to support such a certification process for Congo right now, knowing that with the Dodd-Frank, companies are saying that they have good information, or they will have good information about the what happens from the smelter to the product, but from the mine to the smelter, their information is really lacking. And this is really a government-to-government process that needs to be developed for a certification process. What is the U.S. government doing to support that?
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question for this round. No, right there on the side. See here? Yeah. There you go.
Hi, my name's Tessa Khan. I'm with the American Bar Association's Rule of Law Initiative, which is the organization that was implementing and continues to implement the mobile courts in both South Kivu and Maniema province. And we were part of the program that implemented the particular court that held the trial in which Kabibi and others were prosecuted for the rapes that occurred in Fizi on New Year's Day. And that was at the time hailed as a huge success. It was a trial that was entirely within the Congolese legal system. They used the 2006 law on sexual violence to prosecute rape as a crime against humanity. Lieutenant Colonel Kabibi was the most senior officer to be successfully prosecuted for such a crime. International observers considered it to be a fair trial. The witnesses were protected. And as far as we know, the men, they were sentenced and continue to be secure within prison. And of course, in the last couple of weeks, we've now heard that within the same, within proximity of Fizi, there's been another incident of mass rape, which certainly undermines our confidence in these sorts of procedures and in the power of infrastructure, when it does exist, to create a sufficient antidote to a culture of impunity. So it seems to us that, if nothing else, there has to be a change at a much more normative and at a cultural level to support these institutions when they work, because as far as we're all concerned, that was an example of an institutional success. So we are currently in our programming with organisations like Dr. Mukwege's Pansy Hospital and Heal Africa, working with community and religious leaders to help change the culture at a much more grassroots level, because as we know, there's an increased number of civilians committing rape, which means that simply helping demobilised soldiers reintegrate, supporting the security sector isn't going to be enough. There needs to be a change at a cultural level. And I wonder if any of you have some suggestions as to how best to affect that change, because all the institutions in the world aren't going to flourish if there simply isn't a respect for the rule of law and for the equality of women within Congolese society.
Okay, well, we begin maybe with Secretary Otero telling us what you're going to do with those 30,000 Marines, and then the certification process. And
I will note that as a suggestion. And then let me proceed with, in the Kimberley process, in the whole certification process for conflict minerals, I'm going to be completely honest and tell you that we are working very hard on this. We have the Bureau, the Undersecretary of Economic Growth, Robert Hormats, is very involved in it, as is also one of the bureaus that are working directly with us because of all the issues related to the human rights. So our human rights issues working on this very closely. It's a team that is putting together this effort. I am not part of it, so I could ad-lib and give you some sort of not very informative information, but what I will do is take note of your question and then really respond to you as we move forward. Do you want me to move ahead with the other question? Or maybe let's get other
well, I
people.
think maybe Dr. Mukwege and
Yeah.
Mark first, and then if you have something on the cultural change.
Yes.
Just briefly, the tentative agreement that was reached at the International Conference of the countries of the Great Lakes region with respect to the rules for the conflict minerals and the certification process, the issue really is enforcement and the degree to which the countries involved, including the U.S., are going to press the government to establish some kind of international monitoring of this process. What we've seen thus far is, at least at the rhetorical level, a willingness on the part of the government to participate in this effort. But as we know from the past, unless there's some kind of monitoring that takes place, it's unlikely to succeed.
Okay, Dr. Mukwege.
Je m'intéresse beaucoup à la question que vient de poser notre ami des ABA avec qui nous travaillons. Je pense que c'est ça qui montre en fait, c'est pas un problème culturel, madame, c'est un problème de diagnostic. Puisque lorsque vous sanctionnez et que ça ne donne pas les résultats, il faut se poser la question pourquoi il n'y a pas de résultats. C'est que la personne ne comprend pas. Moi, je crois que quand je dis que tous ces militaires-là sont des malades, il y a des gens qui pensent qu'on exagère. Mais ce sont des malades puisqu'on a détruit leur système de fonctionnement psychologique. Et je pense que ce que nous faisons, le jugement que nous avions fait, nous tous nous avions applaudi et nous avons dit, ça y est, c'est bien parti. Mais ça serait fait au même endroit. Moi, je crois que ce que vient de dire Alula, s'il faut faire un diagnostic profond, il faut que ces militaires-là, s'il vous plaît, on les amène à un traitement. Il faut qu'ils soient détraumatisés. Il faut qu'ils aient une prise en charge psychologique. Peut-être qu'ils peuvent rester dans l'armée, mais l'armée pour cultiver, pour faire les routes, pour faire des actions de ce type. Ils vont garder leur uniforme pour être contents, mais pas avec une arme. On ne donne pas une arme à une personne malade. Deuxième chose, je crois que c'est cette étape-là qui suivrait, qui ferait par exemple à ce que maintenant on constitue une armée de personnes normales dans leur tête. Mais si on va continuer à considérer que ces gens sont des normaux et qu'il faut qu'on continue à les donner les armes, je pense que les mêmes effets vont produire toujours le même résultat. Et je pense que c'est possible aujourd'hui de les rendre économiquement valables en leur donnant un autre travail, que les donner un travail qui les rend dangereux pour la société.
Okay, Mark, yes.
Yeah, one thing to the comment from the American Bar Association. I agree with you about the problem, but the reality is thus far the people who've been prosecuted in large measure have been the militias within FARDC, not FARDC officers who have carried out the rapes. The point is that, yes, cultural change and some of the measures that Dr. Mukwege has discussed are necessary, but immediately what is necessary is to demonstrate that those who carry out rapes will be prosecuted, whether they're members of the militias or whether they're members of FARDC.
Or civilians.
Or
Marie,
civilians.
Which is, I think Mark has just restated something that I said. Also, I completely agree with with it.
Okay. We are getting towards the end of our session, and I would like to ask Ambassador Matifu if she'd like to have a few remarks, given your privileged position as representing your government here.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate on behalf of the government, Dr. Mukwege, for his award. He is a pride and joy of our country, and he represents so many unsung heroes in the Congo. And I take this opportunity also to wish a happy Independence Day to all the Congolese in this room. I would like to thank the U.S. government, the work of the International Crisis Group and the Wilson Center for, from time to time, focusing on the DRC. And you can feel that there is some kind of frustration in this room because this has been going on for so many years. I'm glad that there is more attention on sexual violence, I would say for the last 2-3 years, but this is a situation that has been going on for more than 10 years. Dr. Mukwege started operating on people more than 10 years ago, and we were talking about it, but our voices were very much unheard. Recently, when Mrs. Otero, you mentioned the trip of Secretary Clinton and also 2 trips from Milan Verviers, and I was privileged to be part of those trips. And the most recent trip to the Mpanzi Hospital with Ambassador Verviers was probably one of the most enlightening for Ambassador Verviers. Talking to her, you can sense that she truly understood the complexity of the issue because it's not a black and white issue. MONUC, or MONUSCO today, has been in the DRC for more than 10 years now. Can't we just rethink the whole strategy? MONUC has a budget of more than $1 billion a year. Is there a way to rethink the whole strategy and see how that money can be better used in terms of security sector? I know it's difficult when dealing with a big organization, but I think the money could be used to maybe more efficiently in terms of security sector, because you can train the best army in the world, but after the training, if there is no continuing support, there will be a backlash. We had a conference in January 2008 in Kivu, a conference on the Kivu. I think the International Crisis Group was present. In our view and the view of everybody, the international community was fully represented. The recommendations at that conference were very good. They were very much embraced by everybody at the national level, but also at the international level. Because the key was, how do we stop the violence in that region? The key was to give the combatant other things to do, things other than carrying weapons. So the focus was more on development. There were many promises, friends, partners, international partners. They came one after one and they made promises. I would like to hear your comment on what followed after the conference on the Kivu, because we are almost at square one again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are very short on time now, so I think let's let that be the last question. Anyone wants to respond to that or make any other closing remarks that you wish? Start with Mark.
I think just in general, Madam Ambassador, that the question remains, how do you ensure security in order to permit the development programs to be carried out? And it's not one or the other. I agree with you. I mean, as Dr. Mukwege said, we need to be providing the individuals who have been carrying guns with the training and tools to do something else. And we need to do that in a context in which both they and the people, the communities around them, are secure enough in order to carry out those development programs. And I think that here and elsewhere, it just has to begin with implementing the rule of law and ensuring that those who violate fundamental norms and fundamental standards are prosecuted, are convicted if they're guilty, and are put away. Until that becomes the norm, as opposed to impunity, I think it's very difficult to change the context in which you can have development take place.
Marie, would you?
I think I would say that this panel has been really very good, because I think it has allowed us to once again address the complexity of these issues, and the fact that indeed internationally there are many countries and many organizations that are trying to address this, and that looking at strategies that work and the issues that the ambassador is raising are part and parcel of what is going on right now. In fact, in my own staff, I have 2 people right now, as we speak, who are in the Kivu region right now, or in the eastern part of the country, again trying to look for additional ways in which one can address this. I think what Mark has said regarding the rule of law is something that is absolutely the case, and unless that's put in place, it's going to be very difficult to then move things forward. And finally, being able to provide young people not only opportunities so that they don't, as you say, carry arms, but also so that they're not involved in mining minerals in an illegal way, and giving opportunities is another means that is really enormously important. So I think there is an effort to really move this forward and to try, and I would just say that certainly the Obama administration is very committed to putting resources, efforts, and operating at the diplomatic, at the development, and at all levels possible to address this.
Okay. I'm going to give Dr. Mukwege the last word, so I don't normally get involved as a respondent to anything, but I did want to say something about the ambassador's question, because I'm assuming we're talking about the Goma Accords in January of 2008, and a place where we were also representative, and Michelle Casa, as you know, at the Cohesive Leadership Initiative, had been doing a lot of work in community reconciliation and integration and et cetera. I know a lot of promises were made there, but I do think we've got to keep the reality of history in mind, that when the FARDC decided to go after Nkunda and war ensued in months that followed the Goma Accords, I think that upset an awful lot of international plans at reintegration and community development work and other things that were underway. And I know that happened with us, that a lot of the people we'd been working with, a lot of the community leaders that we'd been working with were suddenly scattered again, and things were polarized again in the region in a way that we thought the Goma Accords were going to be a centerpiece in beginning to bring everyone together. So there were some events there that really played into this, that I think it might have also, as we say in Americanese, it might have spooked a lot of people that who were intending to do some things. But okay. Dr. Mukwege.
Ouais. Madame la sous-secrétaire d'État, chers panélistes, chers participants, je suis très reconnaissant par rapport à cette conférence, parce que je dois dire que pour moi, c'est une conférence qui me donne encore une force supplémentaire de retourner sur le terrain en me disant il y a des hommes et des femmes qui réfléchissent sur les raisons. Vous savez, ça fait 10 ans que jour pour jour, nous travaillons à soigner les plaies créées par les hommes sur les autres hommes de façon la plus brutale. Et parfois, lorsque la personne vient pour la deuxième fois, la troisième fois, le sentiment que ça vous donne, qu'est-ce que je fais ici? À quoi ça sert? Mais je pense que voir la façon dont vous abordez la question, voir la façon dont Madame la sous-secrétaire d'État aborde la question et les réponses qu'elle donne, je crois que ça nous encourage beaucoup de dire, si on s'attaque aux causes, c'est que l'espoir de pouvoir dire, nous sommes en train de soigner les dernières malades est là. Mais avoir toujours le sentiment que il y a encore des nouvelles, il y a encore celles qui sont violées cette semaine. C'est très très décourageant d'être tout le temps derrière la cause, derrière les conséquences, au lieu d'être derrière la cause. J'ai très confiance que les idées qui sont sorties d'ici sont des idées qui vont nous amener progressivement à remettre à la femme sa dignité, à remettre la femme à être une participation active dans le développement de la société congolaise, participer elle-même à sa propre protection, à prévenir tout ce qui peut l'empêcher d'être capable, en fait, de voir son avenir de façon positive. Je vous remercie tous pour votre participation.
Join me in thanking this wonderful panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.